Hi, my name is Ken, Mr. Biz Wentworth, and I am a no-limitspreneur.
You're now locked onto another episode of the Nolimitspreneur Podcast, the show that helps you dominate in life and in business to enhance your mindset, confidence, productivity, time management, habits, and goals. And now, your host, Maher Abiad.
Hey, what is up, Success Nation? It's your boy, Maher Abiad here, back with you again for what is going to be another incredible and value-packed episode. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to Ken Wentworth. For more than 20 years, Ken, also known as Mr. Biz, has advised businesses from Fortune 15 companies to startups on how to establish a solid financial path and create unstoppable businesses. And today we're going to be talking about bettering your business and personal finances, talking about bettering and improving your personal development with such things as improving your mindset, having and setting goals, overcoming all the self-limiting beliefs that we put on ourselves. And this is going to be a fantastic episode. So let's get this interview started right now. Ken, Mr. Biz Wentworth, thank you so much for coming on to the Nolimitspreneur Podcast. I'm really excited to have you here. You have a ton of experience in the business world and entrepreneurship as well. And I really thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. As we mentioned off before we get started, I get asked to come on shows often. I'm fortunate enough for that, but I don't come on all of them. I want to make sure the content is something that I feel like I can add value. And when I went out and looked and listened, studied your show and listened to some of your shows, this is right in my wheelhouse. I love this type of stuff.
Well, I really appreciate that. And we definitely have a ton to talk about today in business, in finance, in personal development, in entrepreneurship. So I'm really, really excited to get started talking about a lot of that stuff today. But before we get started on the juice of the conversation, let's get to know more about you. Can you share a little bit about your story? You've done a lot in business. You help a number of companies out with consulting and business management, with finance. And let's find out about how you got started. Where did you come from how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I worked in the corporate world for, let's just call it 20 plus years. Okay, we don't need to get specific. At JP Morgan Chase, and had an absolutely great career there. It actually set me up to be able to do what I do now, the experience and expertise I was able to develop there. But I got to a point in my career where I realized that I could be having a bigger impact. There were some things that had occurred. I'd come up with 2 revenue generating ideas that were shelved, backburnered, essentially for lack of a better term, some bureaucracy, some red tape, and it was very frustrating. And that's when, as we talked before we get started recording, is, my mind was I've always been entrepreneur, had an entrepreneur's mind, and so I thought, I know with this skill set that I've built, there's something else out there that I can be doing to make a bigger impact, and I knew that in the corporate world, that wasn't going to happen. And so, I was in the top 3% there, and was in a position to be promoted in the top 1%. And that's when I decided I was going to leave, which a lot of people hear that and they go, oh my gosh, what the heck is wrong with you? Who does that? But I share that not to brag or anything, but to tell folks out there that are listening that may be in that same position. Sometimes you have to take that risk. You have to take that leap and have the confidence in yourself. Look back. And this is, one of the things that I'm very passionate about, is that we often don't give ourselves enough credit for what we're capable of. And if you look back, and I talk about this a lot, and you look back in your life and do an honest assessment on things that have been important to you that you've really gone all in on. Not, man, I'd kind of like to do that. I mean, you just said, I am going to make this happen no matter what. I can tell you with almost certainty, you were 100% successful. Every one of those endeavors. Now, if you're being honest, for most of us, even if you're 40-ish or so, there's probably only 2 or 3, maybe 4 times in your life where you had this. So you have to be honest about really being all in. But we all have that in us. We just don't tap into it often enough. So, having the courage to say, when I went back to New York City about 3 weeks later to tell my boss I was going to resign, and he was, blown away. Like, what are you talking about? You're going to be in the top 1% of a, Fortune 15 company. And I explained to him why. And he said, I understand. I get it. And so he said, well, what are you going to do next? And I said, I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. And he looked at me because he was a corporate lifer himself. And he was 60-ish years old. And he said, that makes my brain hurt. You've got a great job here. You're well compensated, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, I just know there's something else that I'm supposed to be doing and that I could be having a bigger impact. So I took that leap, and I'll tell you, it was, again, my corporate career was amazing. And I thought that my level of career fulfillment, like that was as good as it could get. But after I went out on my own and started to help businesses and see the impact that I could have and helping them, run their businesses more profitably, more efficiently, and seeing how that helps create jobs, that helps saves jobs. A lot of small businesses have a very thick element of family to them, and that you've got the owner, and oftentimes you have family members that are working in the business. So think about it. If that business fails, the impact it has not only on the individual owner, but also downstream on other members of the family, where all of a sudden they don't have a job and things. So that impact that I've been able to, very blessed and fortunate to be able to be a part of, man, I'll tell you, like I don't work. I mean, honestly, I look at it as I don't work. I am so blessed, and I know not many people have that. And that's why I feel very blessed and very grateful for it, that I feel like I don't work at all. I'm so excited and passionate about what I do that it's not work at all for me.
Yeah, and that's what you just said, having an impact. You felt like you had this calling and you had to pursue it. And for a lot of people, we get held back into the overthinking stage, and even though that, you feel secure here, you still felt that there was a greater gift that you had that you can give to the world and to really have that fulfillment. And I think it's really important for you to share that story, because it really shows that we have to really try, and we have to accept the fact that there's no such thing as failure. Even if you went out and it didn't work, at least you would know in your heart, and you wouldn't have those regrets. Because if you stayed at that position, more than likely, years down the road, you would have still been thinking about it. What would have happened? And these regrets would have itched at you and gotten stronger and stronger over the years. And as you get older, it's harder to change things. So congratulations on taking that leap, and for going out there and servicing so many people and companies as well. And right now we're in obviously a very difficult time in the world right now with COVID-19 happening. You have a couple of books out talking about finance, and there's your first book is called How to Be a Cash Flow Pro, and then there was another book called Pathway to Profits. People are obviously struggling financially right now. Talk about those books. What were the inspiration for the books? And as well as maybe a two-part question is, what are the 3 pillars of financial success that you also talk about as well?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I should say something that's going to sound really counterintuitive and a little strange. I absolutely do not like to write. So, which sounds really odd for someone who's written a couple of best-selling books. But the first book just started, cash flow is one of those things that can rear its ugly head and be a challenge for businesses at any point in their life cycle. It's not just startups. It's not just, in the 3 to 5 year range of your, it's, I tell this often is that, it's been 10 to 15 years ago, but at one point Amazon ran into some cash flow problems. Now, they weren't as large as they are now, but they were still, they were doing hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue back then. And it's when I mentioned that to say, there's no shame in having a cash flow challenge. I mean, it happens to businesses all over the place at different times. But that's one of the things that I was seeing as I left the corporate world and was helping and working with these business owners, is that cash flow, can be a problem at any time for all these different industries, niches, everything. So I started to compile all these tips and the guidance I was giving these businesses, and to have it into like a resource document so I could give to clients to have, on the shelf, that even when I'm not there, you can pop this thing open. And well, as I continued to add to it and add to it and add to it, my brother said, I mean, you've written a book. Like, what are you going to call this thing? I'm like, it's not a book. It's just a resource document. He goes, you know what a resource document is? If it's big enough, it's a book. Like, and so I'm like, and he talked me in. He said, well, you get, get it published, get it out there. If no one buys any copies, who cares, right? You leak, and then you could say, check another thing off your list. Like, you actually written a book. Wrote the book. Was very fortunate that it got written about in an article from a UK-based writer that put it as his #1 book that business owners need to read. Unbeknownst to me. So all of a sudden, I get this email from Amazon saying, oh my gosh, this book has sold, a gazillion copies. And I'm like, this is the funny part of the story. I went back and I had to find my login for my author page on Amazon because it had been a couple months, didn't know anything about it. I emailed them and I said, this is a mistake. I hadn't promoted the book. I'd barely told anyone that it was even out there. Well, here, this article I found out a couple weeks later had been written. And so the sales exploded and all this other stuff. So it was great, which then inspired me to write the second book. I thought, well, geez, I have a whole lot more, subsequent to that first one that I could share. So that's when I wrote Pathway to Profits, which again talks about a bunch of other topics, talking about how to hire people, how to hire the best people and hire them faster. What do you look for when you hire people? Obviously, there's elements of cash flow. There's a whole large section about growing your revenue. There's about controlling your expenses without hurting your business, because sometimes people do that, So a whole bunch of different things. That's what sort of led to those books. And we've got 2 more books. One's in rough draft form and another one's sort of an outline form. So, and again, I know you're probably thinking, I thought you said you don't like to write. I don't. I promise you I don't. But it's been very fulfilling because I know that with the books we're getting out there, that we're getting into people's hands, that it's helping people. And from that, I'm hearing from people, social media, people reach out to me a lot. And so I think it's really important. But those 3 pillars of success this is what I start with every client that when I begin working with them, we start with these 3 things. And I look at this as, this is like a foundation of your house. You could build an amazing house, but if the foundation isn't strong, eventually your house is going to crumble, no matter how beautiful it is, no matter how large it is, right? So you have to have that foundation. And so these 3 things I consider to be the foundation of any, financial success of any business. And the first one this is going to shock you, cash flow. We work on cash flow because almost all businesses, there are even some tweaks we can make. Even if you aren't having challenges, there are tweaks we can make to make it even better, to enhance it, to improve it. And so we start there, because without cash, you don't have a business. As I say, I close out my radio show, Mr. Biz Radio, with cash flow is king. Again, without cash, you don't have a business. So cash flow, we optimize that. And then we move to the B word, a word that a lot of people don't like, including Mrs. Biz, my wife, budget. People don't like that word because I think a lot of people, the connotation of a budget is similar to how people think of when they hear the word diet. I'm going to go on a diet. Oh, I have to, eat salad and drink water all day. Well, that's not necessarily the case, right? And it's not necessarily the case with a budget. A budget is just a plan that you monitor against to get you to a goal, and you monitor against it. And I'll tell you, this is how important I find it. If I'm going to work with you and you say, I'm not going to do a budget, I say, I can't work with you, because I know that's how important it is. And I can tell you, as of this recording, all of the businesses I've ever worked with, and since I've been outside the corporate world, only a couple of them have had even tried to use a budget before, but they've never stuck with it. Every business, the first year we use a budget, they have a record-breaking year. And that might be a business that's been in business for 3 years, 5 years. I got one business that the first year they had a budget, they had been in business for 28 years, and they broke all of the records after 28 years in business. That is how powerful a budget is. It helps you monitor what's working, what's not working, and fix the things that aren't, and you know about it right away, not 6 months down the road and things like that. So you can adjust to ensure you're still getting towards those goals you have for the year. And then the third pillar is pricing. And I know that sounds strikingly obvious. Someone says, well, geez, yeah, you got to have your pricing right. But here's the part that's interesting to me is that I call it the silent business killer. Almost every business that I've worked with has a product or service that they offer that is either break even or loses money. And I call it the silent business killer because they don't realize it. So when I start working with a business and they go, oh, Mr. Biz, my pricing is fine. We don't even need to look at that. And I said, well, humor me. Let me go through it just so I can learn it. And inevitably, as I peel back the onion, I find those products and those services that they just don't even realize. I had one business that his highest volume product, he was losing money on it. And so he's selling this thing, and he's got his salespeople selling this thing like crazy. Well, think about it. He's losing money for every sale. So, and I told him, I said, that's why you had to call me. Ironically enough, that's why you had to call me, because he called me and he said, I don't understand. Our sales are going up, but I'm having trouble making payroll. I have cash flow problems. I'm losing money, but my sales are increasing. So the first thing I think of is, well, you must be spending too much money. So I'm looking at expenses and I'm like, There wasn't anything on the surface that really stuck out. But as we look through it, it's like, this is it. This is the problem, right? So those three, cash flow, budgeting, and pricing, those are really, really important things. Once you get those in order, you have that foundation and you can just take off. I mean, you can stratospheric growth, things like that, but you have to have those three, in my opinion, you have to have those three things really nailed down to be able to build from there.
So many of us have these ideas, as you were just talking about. You got this idea and then you realize you got to get it out to the world. So many of us have these ideas that we just don't take action on. And something that I realized what was happening to me when I was really discovering and working on my own personal development, I had all these ideas in my head that I wanted to share. But then I came to the conclusion that, oh my goodness, I am not putting it down anywhere. I'm having it stored here, but I'm not, documenting it. So then I almost did what you did, was I started, dumping everything into Evernote, all my ideas. And then that way I could have a chronological, a logical sort of flow towards whatever it is that I was training. And of course, financial, ability to have your business run properly and your personal finances. Budgeting is absolutely massive. That was one thing that absolutely changed the game for me when I was dealing with debt, for example, and without a budget, without knowing sort of your income and expenses, without having, I always say, if you can't see the problem, you can't fix the problem. And that's the power of sort of the budgets. It keeps you on track. You're not, if you, with grocery shopping, for example, a lot of us just go out grocery shop and buy things, but it's not related. That spend, you don't know where it fits into the overall picture. Are we overspending? Do we have more to allocate to this? And that's very, very powerful advice. One thing that we're dealing with in life, all of us, is problems that bring us down, that push us in different directions, that these roadblocks. Talk about succeeding at all odds when we have, things stacked up against us. I believe resilience is key in life. And another thing that I truly believe in, and I've seen in my own life and other people's lives as well, is when your backup is against the wall, I really feel that you perform better because you really have nothing to lose and you have just everything to give forward. Talk about sort of that, when things are stacked up against you, how you can kind of go forward in your life and how that's related to your life as well.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I want to circle back just real quick before I even answer that. Is one of the things, and I just saw this morning. So this is like, the study was fairly recent, but I just literally saw this and read it this morning. So, and it's super powerful, talking about exactly what you had mentioned about writing things down. And Harvard Business Review did a study, and they said, first of all, crazy, 83% of people, 83% have no goals. Not even in their head. 83% of people, which I was blown. I mean, I'm super goal oriented. So to me, that was like, you got to be kidding me. It just seems so foreign, right? The 14% of people, now there's a little gap in there because there's some others, but 14% of people who set goals, they set them, but they don't write them down. They are 10 times more likely to accomplish their goals than the 83% who don't. So just having the thought in your head is super powerful. Take it one step further. The people, of the 14% who have goals and write them down, just to what you were talking about, they're 3 times as likely as the 14% to accomplish their goals. So if you have goals and you write them down, you are 30 times more likely to be successful. I mean, think about how powerful that is. And again, this wasn't some rinky-dink. This was Harvard Business Review. This is a major institution, well-known, no monkey business, very sound data. I was blown away by that, but it absolutely speaks wholeheartedly to what you had mentioned. Huge, massive. But as far as resiliency goes, there's a story, and I'm not the originator of this, but I use, often will use the hashtag when I share things on social media of burn the ships. And for those unfamiliar, some people may have heard that and maybe they kind of get that what it's associated with. They don't know it. Real quick, there's a story about a guy was an explorer named Cortez. And he was exploring, and he decided he was commissioned to take 6 ships into what was then, I believe, Mexico, to essentially conquer that land. And he gets there, and again, I'm telling a very shortened version of the story, but he gets on land, and he's got these 6 ships of guys, and they get off, and they look around, and they kind of hit the beach, and they get up over the mound, and they look out across the land, and they see an absolute sea of people. And again, this was back in, I believe it was in the 1600s. So this is, someone's account of the story, but allegedly they were outnumbered 50-1. So most people in that situation would say, okay, hightail it back to the ships. This is we can't do this, whatever. Well, Cortez, his second in command, looked at him when they were blown away. They saw these people like, holy crap, what are we going to do? And supposedly, as the story goes, Cortez looked at him and he said, well, sir, what do we do? And he said, burn the ships. And the guy looked at him and he said, what do you mean burn the ships? If we burn the ships, what are we going to do? If we start losing, we have no way to retreat. Why would we burn the ships? He said, that's why we're going to burn the ships. There is no plan B. You fight to win or you're going to die. So that's, to your point about your back against the wall. Talk about putting your back against the wall, right? You know that if you don't win in that scenario, you are going to die. So that's the ultimate, obviously, back against the wall. But that story, I think, relates again, very analogous with what you had mentioned about when you have, and they, of course, as the story goes, I wouldn't be telling the story if it didn't have a happy ending, as they won. They conquered the land. They overcame that 50-1 deficit that would have you being overwhelmed by the opponent. But that's a pure example of those guys didn't have a plan B. There was nothing. And so somehow, some way they won. Now, have the numbers been embellished over time? Maybe, I don't know, but they were severely outnumbered, suffice to say, and they had no plan B. Their back was against the wall, and they had to do it because they burnt the ships, which again was completely unheard of. But I think that is a very good example. And I think too often in life, I just saw someone mention this recently. They said, my only plan B is figuring out how plan A can work better. And I thought that was a neat thing to say as well, because I think when you have a plan B and you know that you have that, if this doesn't work, I'll just fall back on this. We don't push as hard. You don't try as hard because I've got this plan B and I know I can do it. When I left the corporate world, I had a large amount of money saved up to be able to, some capital to start the business, things like that. But I knew when I ran out of that money, I ran out of the money, right? So I had to make it work. I had to figure it out. I had to, bob and weave as I learned things and cross over those inevitable bumps in the road. But I think that resiliency, I call it consistent perseverance, is that, as they say, getting knocked down 7 times and getting up 8. Babe Ruth, famous baseball player in the United States, had a quote that it's impossible to beat someone who never gives up. And if you think about that, you go, well, yeah, no kidding. But it really is important to know a lot of these people that we as society look at and we deem as successful, they have stories like this. Howard Schultz, who started Starbucks, I forget the number. I think it was, he talked to 118. He was turned down by 118 banks. A lot of people don't know Starbucks started out as they just sold coffee beans. They had no retail locations. Well, the beans became so popular that he said, man, we can, create retail locations. Well, he needed money. So as the story goes, he was turned down 118 times, 119th bank gave him money. And now Starbucks pretty successful, right? So, but he could have at any point during those first 118 rejections said, okay, this isn't going to work. Oprah Winfrey, a lot of people, she's a billionaire. People say, oh my gosh, she's so successful. She was told that she would never make it in television. Imagine if she would have taken that rejection and said, oh, you know what? Okay, you're right. Let me go, go over and do this or whatever, something different. Bill Gates was turned down, I think, 53 times pitching Microsoft to different places. You can go on the number of people that have had to exhibit, those people that are really successful have had to exhibit consistent perseverance in order to be successful. Resiliency, consistent perseverance, very synonymous.
Burning the boats is something that I am really trying to live by right now. I really want to make this work, this mission that I'm on right now. I see the potential in people, and I really know that this is my calling in life, to really help people get out of their heads, to be able to accomplish whatever it is, whatever that success looks like in their life. That is such an amazing story. And people really need to start taking action on what their perfect life is. And this study on goals is mind-boggling, because when you jump into the car, do you just one day jump into a car and not know where you're driving? No, you say, okay, I'm going to the grocery store. And then you take that action to go to the grocery store. But if you hit construction or you hit a detour, you still find your way around that. And I always call it the North Star. This is what is the direction that I'm going to in my life? Where's that boat going? Because it's like a magnet. If you don't have a direction to where you want to go in life, you're going to have people, you're going to have things, you're going to have people knock you off course and tell you that you're not good enough, you're not worthy, you can't do it, and you might believe them. But if you are so fixated on that goal, you're gonna still go into that direction. So having goals, writing them down, super, super important, because otherwise you're not living life. You're just a boat sitting in the middle of the water, and the waves are just pushing you in any random direction. And when you're 75 looking back, you're going to be saying, where's my life? What did I accomplish? And at that point, it's too late to change. And this is where let's talk about people being able to reach their full potential. You have something called SMAC, and how people can use it to reach their full potential. Talk more about that.
Yeah, SMAC is one of those things that I unknowingly developed in my head over the years, and I didn't realize I had a system or a process that I followed in order to accomplish goals and reach your full potential. And the reason I say full potential is that, again, it's something I alluded to earlier, is what I find is people I call it faking the funk. They're faking the funk. They're saying, you know what, this is as good as I can do. When in reality, your capabilities are vastly better than that. And so, SMAC as an acronym is the S is start with the S. I think that's the super important thing. And I should mention, and again, I don't mean this to brag, but someone might say, well, yeah, I've heard motivational things. I've heard how to accomplish goals. Why is Ken so much better? Or why should I listen to him as opposed to someone else? I've used this not only in goals in my personal life and my career, but I've been fortunate enough to be able to break 6 world records over in the athletic world. And so I've used this SMAC. And so starting with yes, and a lot of that deals obviously with mindset, but I think about that in the application of in business and in life. And I know we were talking before we started the interview is, we all have people in our lives that are, you come up with a new idea and you talk to one of your friends, your buddies, and you say, I got this new idea and I'm thinking I want to do X, Y, and Z. That person is going to tell you 5 ways that it won't work. They're starting with no. And I had this happen in the corporate world where, we had, right before I left JP Chase, I worked in the corporate line of business. So I dealt with a lot of the top, 20 people in the company, including the CEO and things like that. And so we had a project we needed to do. I had someone on my team say, yeah, we can't do that. And I said, okay, well, explain that to me, because in my vocabulary, can't means won't. I can't means I won't. And so I said, well, explain that to me. And he said, well, we just, it would take this many people working this many hours and this and that. And I said, well, Jamie Dimon, he's still the CEO of JP Chase, and he was at the time. I said, if Jamie Dimon called you right now and said, I need you to do this, could you do it? And he said, well, I mean, we could, but 5 people would have to work 20-hour days for the next week to get it done. I said, aha. So it can be done. Now, how do we massage that? I don't want people working 20-hour days. That's insane. What if I put a dozen people on it instead of 5? Could we get it done in 8 days? What would that look like? Instead of just saying, nope, can't be done, right? That would have been completely shelved. We would just abandon the whole thing. So that's an example of that and use it in your business. Use it with your customers. When a customer comes and has a request, don't think about right away why it won't work. Challenge yourself to change your mindset to think about how it can work. When I in my competition days, and my world record's in bench press. And the first time I bench pressed 275 pounds, I said, I'm going to bench press 500. Now, from 275 to 500 is a long way, right? And even a lot of guys I trained with, which are very serious competitive guys, they started with no. They said, yeah, I mean, that's a big goal, but you might want to ratchet that thing down a little bit. Like, that's out of the realm. Like, I don't know that that's going to happen. And I just ignored it because I know, as they say, where there's a will, there's a way. So I'm going to figure it out. So I started with yes. So very, very important there. And I think, another important aspect of that, of starting with yes, is think about it this way. There's no need to recreate the wheel. So that kind of leads me into, there's someone who's been successful in what you're trying to accomplish more than likely. Even if you're trying to do better than them, figure out what got them to that point. So, if they've broken a world record, you're trying to break theirs. So that leads me into the M of SMAC, which is model expert behavior. And that one, the best thing I can illustrate with that is a quote, one of my favorite quotes by Steve Jobs. And I love this, and I have ingrained this in our kids. And it actually has come back to backfire me a couple of times, but if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So often we are afraid. Fear holds us back in a lot of ways, right? Not only within ourselves, but, when I attack a new goal, that is something that I don't know enough about, I go out and I find books, I find videos, I immerse myself in that topic. And then I reach out to the author of the book, or, the person who holds the world record in whatever. I found the guy, he wasn't in my weight class, for example, but he was a world record holder at the time, and he lived in Iowa, and I'm in Ohio. And I reached out to him. I got his friend of a friend of a friend, got his email address. This was a long time back. And I reached out to him, and I told him who I was. And I said, I want to break a world record, and I want to bench press 500 pounds. You're the man. If I fly out there on my own dime, can I get in a hotel and stay in a hotel in Iowa for a week and train with you and just learn everything I can from you? And he said, who does that? And that's the point. Not a lot of people do, but that's why not a lot of people don't break world records and accomplish things like that to reach your full potential of thinking about outside the box. When I started my radio show, I did the first one and it was absolutely terrible. And I said, man, I got to get better at this or I'm not going to do it. And I wasn't going to not do it. So I reached out to 4 nationally syndicated talk show hosts. Again, some of my friends said, what are you, crazy? Like, they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to answer you. What's the worst thing they do? They ignore me or they say no. All 4 of them got back to me. All 4. And I got a tremendous amount of help from them. So don't be afraid to reach out to those people. A lot of those people have benefited earlier in their career from having, gotten guidance from someone that was above them at the time. And so they're willing to do that. You got to be very respectful of their time, of course, and things like that. But that's the thing. You don't have to, recreate the wheel. When I first started competing, I said, in powerlifting, you weigh in 24 hours before you compete. So there are weight classes. And so if you have the ability to cut weight, to lose weight rapidly, weigh in, and then rehydrate and build your weight back up before you compete, it's a massive advantage. It's extremely difficult to do, though. And so I figured that out, and I got 4 books, I think about 4 or 5 books on weight loss, on weight cutting, not just weight loss, but weight cutting, like wrestlers do. You hear about things like that. And the book that I liked the most, I reached out to the author. I'm still, to this day, that was 20 years ago easily. I'm still friends with that guy to this day. And I ended up flying to meet him, to spend a whole weekend with him and just absolutely pick his brain. And I got to the point where, and I know a lot of people think this is just absolutely crazy, but this is to show you that when you think you've reached your full potential, and usually when I talk about this SMAC, this SMAC, to an audience, I'll ask people, what do you think, if you were really spot on with your diet, how much weight can you lose in a week? Right? And people typically throw out, maybe 8 pounds, 10 pounds. And I'll say, okay, well, how about a day? Translate that 8 or 10 pounds into a day. How much could you lose in a day? And, 1 pound, 2 pounds, maybe 3 pounds in a day. And I illustrate to them that I was able to, through enhancing and optimizing my ability to cut that weight, I was able to lose 17 pounds in a 24-hour period. And most people say, there's no way. It's not possible. That's what I mean. Someone says, oh, okay. If the answer was 3, you could probably lose 6 or 7 if you really pushed yourself. No, absolutely not. We are capable, not only physically, but mentally, of so much more than we give ourselves credit for. And again, I'm just a regular person, but I've applied these methods to be able to do that. It's super, super important to be able to do that. And again, I don't say that to brag. I just show it to illustrate, like, if I can lose 17 pounds in 24 hours, think about what you can do. And again, I go back to what I mentioned earlier, is we all have had these things in life where we've gone all in on. When I was cutting that weight, I had to make that weight class. For me not to make the weight class, it wasn't an option. I could have competed in a higher weight class, but I was chasing a world record in that class. So to not make weight would have been, the whole training cycle would have been, a complete failure. So I burnt the ship. I had no option. I had to make weight. And I did. And so, and it was extreme. It's probably the most difficult thing I've ever done physically in my entire life. But I look back on that now I've done that. And I look back when I am challenged by something and I feel like, man, I don't know, right? I have doubts too, just like everyone else. But whenever I reach those points, I look back and I go, really? You lost 17 pounds in one stinking day, and you're worried about this, whatever that particular challenge is at the moment, right? If you can do that, this is a piece of cake. And you can lean on those experiences. And like I said, we all have those. Maybe yours isn't losing 17 pounds in a day, but it's something else. It's one of those things that I mentioned earlier, that those 2, 3, 4 things in life that you've gone all in on and said, I will not stop until I'm successful. Lean on those as you face new challenges. It's super important. The A, and I'll get through these a little quicker, but the A in SMAC is accountability, creating accountability. And I like to call it creating a sphere of accountability. It's easy to say, hold yourself accountable. It's easy to, say, oh man, push yourself. And to create a sphere of accountability, you might think, well, yeah, I'm going to have, people in my inner circle, hey, make sure you're holding me accountable. What I've found over the years is that doesn't always work overtly. And the reason it doesn't is oftentimes people in your inner circle, they kind of have a feel, even if you're not telling them, how successful you are at that, what you're trying to accomplish. And by human nature, we don't want to pour salt in a wound. So if I know you're chasing a goal and I'm pretty sure you're not doing well, even though I'm supposed to hold you accountable, I don't want to ask because I don't want you to feel bad, right? That it's just that sympathetic nature that we all have. But that's exactly when you need someone to hold you accountable. You need someone at that moment to say, okay, why is it not going well? Let's talk about this. But that sphere of accountability. So the way I do that, and I found is very valuable, is I'm very transparent about my goals. And I let people know, if anyone who asks, I tell them, here's my goal. So when I would compete, someone would say, oh, when's your next competition? Oh, it's the World Championships in August. Oh, okay. Well, what's your goal? Well, my goal at the World Championships is 500 pounds. So I know that sometime in August or after, when I run into that person, they're going to ask me, how did it go? Did you accomplish your goal? And, when I speak in front of an audience, what I'll say often is when I start out with this piece of the SMAC is I'll say, how many people in here, raise your hand if you like to disappoint people? And of course, no one raises their hand, right? And that's the whole point of creating that sphere of accountability is I know that person's going to hold me accountable. I don't want to let them down. Even if they never ask me, in my mind, they're going to ask me. And I don't want to let them down. I will also create 2 other things I do to create that is for my personal accountability. I have these, they're called composition books, but they're really small composition books. You could literally fit it in like a breast pocket of a shirt. You can put it in your pocket of your pants. And how I write the name of the goal on the front of it. And then each page is a day. And every day at the end of the day, I have to write down at least 3 things that I did that day to get me closer to that goal. And it sounds a little bit cheesy. And it sounds old school because it's, paper, not on your phone or on your laptop or whatnot. But the way for me, physically having that and physically carrying that thing around me. So my training cycles when I would train were typically 16 to 18 weeks. So it's difficult to stay motivated over the entire time. So we all hit those inevitable lulls. The thing that's valuable about these little books is when you hit that lull, flip back, however long you've already been going, flip back several days and start to read the things you've already done, the sacrifices you've already made for that goal. And I think for most people this works, and I know it definitely works for me. When that happens, when I get up in the morning, I'm just not feeling it that day. And it's like, oh man, I flip back and I start to see the sacrifice. I read a few pages, right? Or 3-4 days of things I did. It might have been, 6 weeks earlier. I see the sacrifices I already made. I see the things I've already done, the progress I've made towards that goal. And now I'm reignited. And it really gets me going. Last thing I do for that is I create, these little 3x5 index cards. And I'll come up with when I competed, I used to write down the number of kilograms I wanted to lift. I'd write the number down. And I put one on my monitor. I put one on the dash of my truck. I put one on the mirror in my bathroom in front of where I'm brushing my teeth, shaving, all that stuff. I put that there. So I have a constant reminder. So that's for me. So I see it all the time. And then it's also helping to create that sphere of accountability, because guess what? Someone gets in my truck, sits in the passenger side, and they see this goofy 3x5 index card with a number written on it or a name. I just had a business goal recently that 50 by Cinco. So I wanted to have $50,000 in sales in a particular thing by Cinco de Mayo. So I got to get, for me, that's a somewhat creative side. I had to have some sort of catchy name, right? So I have 50 by Cinco on this card taped to my dash. Someone gets in my truck to go, we're going to lunch. And of course, what happens? They see it and they go, what the heck do you have an index card on your dash for? And what is 50 by Cinco? So now I explain it to them. Now I've increased my sphere of accountability, because now that person knows my goal. And now I don't want to let them down either. So again, for me, those things are extremely important. So that's the A. So again, we talked about starting with the S, modeling expert behavior, creating that sphere of accountability. And the last one, fourth one, is consistent perseverance, the C that I mentioned earlier. And that Cortez story goes to it, that Babe Ruth quote. And as I mentioned, we all of us, I promise you, you have this in you. Even if you think you don't, you do. And what I challenge is those 2 to 3, 4 things that you've done in life where you've gone all in and been successful. Why do we, myself included, why don't we tap into that more often? Because it's there. It's there for the taking. It's there for the, for the success. And so we need to really tap into that more.
Incredible tips after incredible tips after incredible tips. These are all such valuable pieces of information that people really need to start implementing in their lives. I really started to do the yes as much as possible, because when you start saying yes, and the most important thing is to show up. Once you show up, guess what happens? You create opportunity. And when you create opportunity, you never know who you're going to meet. You never know what's going to happen. That's the whole point of even why I started this show, because I wanted to give myself an opportunity to meet amazing guests such as yourself and others, so we can really start to change the world and better people's lives. And the accountability, way back in one of the earlier episodes, I created a podcast episode called Who Are You Accountable To? And when I realized that I wasn't accountable to anybody, and if I said, hey, I got to get up at 4 a.m. to record a video or write a blog post or whatever the case may be, there was nobody that was going to be there to pat me on the back and say, hey, good job for waking up at 4 a.m. At the same time, nobody was going to be there to tell me, hey, you didn't wake up at 4 a.m. I wasn't accountable to anybody. And then when I started to be accountable to my future self, because then I realized that there's a version of me in the future that is the perfect version of me that I want to attain and get to, because the person that I am now is not the person that I can be in the future. Because to be at a greater level of success, I have to change. So to be that future self, I have to be accountable to them. So that's why I always remember every time I want to do something, who am I being accountable to? Because then, like you just said, it forces you. And there's so many people that want to better their lives, that maybe want to become entrepreneurs or are aspiring entrepreneurs right now. What do you think that the three traits would be for people to be successful in entrepreneurship, to be able to better their lives and their families' lives as well?
Yeah, I'll tell you honestly, and this is going to sound, it sounds like I'm starting with no here, but I want to be really honest and very transparent. Not everyone's cut out to be an entrepreneur. There's a lot of people who want to be an entrepreneur that, at least in my mind, they're going to struggle to be successful. Not because they're not super intelligent, not because they don't have a good idea even maybe. They don't have the right mindset. They don't have that they don't exhibit consistent perseverance. They're the people that, for whatever reason, they get knocked down and they stay down. And they're the ones that, again, I don't mean this to sound rude, but they give up too easily. They get that inevitable gut punch from. So those things, I mean, that first of all, you have to have, to me, you have to be creative. You have to always have your mind spinning around and thinking about new ideas and how to serve. Don't think of the business you want to run or what you want to sell. Think about how you can be of value to people and how that fits in with your expertise. We all have expertise. And again, that's one of the things that we don't give ourselves enough credit for. And I struggle with this when I first left the corporate world, especially working in a financial institution. There's a lot of people that I worked with or around me, my colleagues, that had the same sort of expertise that I had. So it became ingrained in my mind that, yeah, I know these things, but like everyone knows that, right? Everyone knows how to improve their cash flow. Everyone knows that you have to have a budget and how to create a budget. And, everyone knows how to motivate themselves and accomplish goals. Well, they don't. You have that and whatever that is, right? And a lot of people don't. And so keeping that in mind, having that idea and thinking how to use your expertise. Look, I was part of a group, and I'll mention this now just as an example. When the quarantine first happened, I formed it. Well, I didn't form it. Another guy formed it, but there were 5 of us that are very entrepreneur spirits. And we said, what is this going to look like coming out of quarantine? How is the world going to change? How can we help people, right? So coming out of this, people are going to be wanting to have more social distancing on things probably, right? This isn't going to just wear off. They'll be more weary of that. This is, again, not to sound negative, but this health type scare is probably going to happen again, right? We've had things in the past. They'll probably continue to happen in the future. So, we came up with the idea, silly as it may sound, or maybe intelligent, depending on when you're listening to this, but of a drive-in theater. So when I was a kid, drive-in theaters were much more popular, and they've kind of died off. And so we researched, why did they die off? And a lot of it had to do with real estate values and people just cashed out and things like that. But we started to think about it. That's social distancing. When you're at a drive-in theater, you're with the people generally that are in your house and things like that. Who's going to want to go into a movie theater and sit next to a stranger who might sneeze or, this, that, or the other? And so we came up with this idea, and we started looking at land, and we were really pushing forward. As we were doing all that, we found out that Walmart was in the process of using their parking lots to create temporary drive-in theaters, several large commercial real estate companies. And it's like, okay, we were looking at, getting one of these up was going to take us about 18 months. So by that time, the big giants would have already, seized the market share and all that stuff. But having that mindset, that entrepreneur mindset, always thinking about what's next, how can you serve? You have to be always thinking about, when you see a problem, how can I solve it for consumers, for whoever that is a problem for, and really that consistent perseverance comes back into it again. You have to have that. You could be extremely intelligent, you could have ideas out the wazoo, but if you don't exhibit consistent perseverance, you won't be successful. In my mind, you will not be successful as an entrepreneur, because as an entrepreneur, you will have failures. No matter how successful you are, you will have failures. And so how do you deal with those? You have to be able to continue to get up time and time again. And then the last piece, I think, as an entrepreneur is admitting and being self-aware of what you don't know and what you need help with. I'm not good at a lot of stuff. There are certain things that I know that I'm pretty good at, and there are a lot of stuff that I am terrible. And instead of me trying to, as I like to say, fake the funk, and instead of me trying to fake the funk and figure it out and spin my wheels and take way too much time, bring an expert in. And maybe it's an expert, that can help you with your mindset. If that's something that's a challenge for you, if you get demotivated and unmotivated a lot of times, maybe you need that coach to help with your accountability. And because I'll tell you, if you need a coach and you get a good coach that really fits into your wheelhouse of your challenges, you will be amazed at how your life will change for the positive. And anyone out there, I know there's a lot of people I talk about, getting a coach and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people go, I think it's, especially for guys, probably it's an ego thing. I don't need a coach. I'm good. I'll figure it out. Well, I'll throw this one out there to anyone who thinks that. We all know Tiger Woods. Do you know how many coaches Tiger Woods has had? Now, of course, his golf career has gone down as he's gotten older. But when he was in his heyday, he absolutely dominated golf like presumably no one ever has. You know how many coaches he's had? Tiger Woods didn't do it on his own. Michael Jordan, a lot of people consider the greatest basketball player of all time. Do you know how many coaches he had? He had coaches for defense. He had coaches for shooting. He had his head coach that, for the team. He had a gazillion coaches because he knew he didn't know it all. And he was self-aware enough to say, I'm a pretty good shooter, but to be the greatest of all time, I need a coach that's going to help me get to that level. If that's what you want, you have to consider those things. And again, you got to interview your coach. You got to find a coach that's really good at the things that you're bad at. Don't hire a coach that's good at what you're good at, because that's duplicating efforts in a lot of ways. And you won't get the same benefit out of it. But boy, I'll tell you, those three things is and I see it, I saw it some with myself, the latter part of the things that especially when you first start a business, you're trying to DIY everything. You're trying to bootstrap to save money. I understand that. And I wholeheartedly agree with that as well. But there are certain things that you have to just say, you know what? I gave up on my website. Someone said, oh, you can build a website. Just Google it, watch some YouTube videos. You can figure it out. Well, I spent way too much time and the website was terrible. It was awful. The graphics were bad. I couldn't figure out how to do this. And it would take me 20 minutes to figure out how to make a simple change on the website, where I ended up, now I have someone who does all that for me. I hired him, and literally, we were screen sharing when I finally hired him. And there was something that I had worked on, and I watched a video. I tried to figure it out, and I screen shared with him, and it literally took him 15 seconds to fix it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And that made me think back of all the other things on my website that I had attempted to do, and I was successful with how long it took me. And what could I have been doing with all that time? Real quick example of that as well is a realtor friend said, I'm inundated with paperwork. He's got a one-man shop, and I'm inundated with paperwork, and it's holding me back. I have to be out selling. I have to be out showing houses and things like that. And all this is holding me back. I said, you got to hire an assistant. He said, I can't afford it. I said, well, hire a virtual assistant, right? So it's variable. You only use him or her when you need him. And he said, Ken, I can't afford it. And I said, well, you can't afford it. You can't not afford it is what I said was, think of it this way. Don't think of it, again, kind of start with yes. Think about if you hired a virtual assistant that worked 1 hour a day for you, 5 hours a week. How much does that cost you, right? And you go, well, what's 5 hours a week going to do for me? Well, let me tell you what it'll do for you. In a year, it gives you 260 hours. And so I looked at him and I said, how many houses can you show in 260 hours? How many sales can you impact in 260 hours? Use that time, that 5 hours a week, to go to what I call RPAs, revenue producing activities. And that virtual assistant, if they're call it $20 an hour, it costs you $100 a week. In a year, it's $5,000. How much is one real estate transaction for you? You're going to make $5,000 more than likely in one real estate transaction. So in those 260 hours you freed up, how many transactions how many revenue producing activities are you going to be successful at? Let's say, I don't know, in 260 hours, you sell 5 houses and your average commission is $5,000. You made $25,000 and you spent 5. And those are very conservative estimates. Now can you tell me you can't afford a VA? If you don't hire the VA, you're missing out on those 25,000 in sales. If you hire, you have a net $20,000, And so I think changing that mindset helps as well. But those three things critically important in my mind to be successful as an entrepreneur.
Life is so hard, and obviously being able to battle through failure and understanding that failure is part of the learning process makes us so much better, because then you'll know who you are and what your envelope is, and being able to push through that envelope is so important to be a successful entrepreneur and to also be successful in life. Thank you so much for dropping so many nuggets today. To close off, how can people get in touch with you? How can people learn more about you and reach out if they want to connect?
Yeah, definitely reach out. We share content almost every single day. Not so much on the weekends, but definitely Monday through Friday on all the different platforms. So on Facebook, Mr. Biz Solutions, Instagram, Mr. Biz Solutions, our website, MrBizSolutions.com, Twitter, Mr. Biz Tweets, all the social media. Honestly, if you Google Mr. Biz, you'll probably find me. I have a YouTube channel. I do a lot of videos. And I would also say anyone who has a video or a topic they want me to cover, whether it's a financial type thing, a business optimization, it's a motivational type thing, as I say back in the old radio days, we take requests. So I love to hear from people. Send me a tweet, send me a DM, say, hey, I'd love for you to cover this topic, and I'll do a video about it and give you a shout out or whatever so you can see it. Because I've done probably, I don't know, a couple hundred videos like that are 3 to 5 minutes in length, where we cover, bite-sized topics like that to help people.
That's fantastic. Ken, Mr. Biz Wentworth, thank you so much for coming on to the Nolimitspreneur Podcast today. I really appreciate you spending time with me today and sharing so much value, and I definitely wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you very much for having me. I had a great time. Hopefully I wasn't too long-winded. I get excited about these things, I told you. But no, I really enjoyed it, and I hope it was helpful to the listeners, and have a great day, and keep on keeping on.
Thank you so much once again to my guest today, Ken Wentworth, for coming onto the podcast. I really hope you got a ton of value. Make sure to subscribe right now on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app, along with leaving a review so others can also get the benefit that you got out of today's episode. Once again, my name is Maher Abiad. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to another quality episode of the Nolimitspreneur Podcast with your host, Maher Abiad. Want to continue to master your mindset? Download the 7 self-limiting beliefs that are stealing your success away guide for free right now at nolimitsmindset.com.